What if our understanding of money, how it works, its real purpose, what if that was completely flipped on its head? We often hear about Bitcoin in the news, right? And it's frequently painted as, something for criminals or maybe just speculative trading. But what if there's a much deeper story there, a more profound philosophical story woven into its existence? A story that really touches on individual freedom, resistance against control, and maybe true financial empowerment.
Absolutely. Today, we're embarking on, well, a pretty fascinating philosophical journey into Bitcoin. We're drawing heavily from Andrew M. Bailey's insightful book, Resistance Money, a philosophical case for Bitcoin. And just to be clear, this deep dive isn't here to give you investment advice. That's not the goal. It's really about understanding Bitcoin's foundational reason for being, its role in our imperfect world, even with its flaws. Our mission today is to try and extract the most crucial insights to help you become genuinely well-informed about this technology, which, let's face it, is often misunderstood. We'll explore its origins, how it functions, where it fits in the bigger monetary picture, and why some people argue it's actually a net benefit for humanity.
And as we navigate this, it's a complex topic, but it's vital. Remember that grasping these foundational ideas is really key. For more resources, for further exploration, a great place to start is bitcoinbytes.org. That's bitcoinbytes.org. It's an excellent resource, really, for anyone looking to go even deeper into the world of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's start by really unpacking this concept the book introduces, resistance money. What exactly is Bitcoin designed to resist?
Yeah, that's the core idea. The book immediately frames Bitcoin's creation as a direct response, a reaction to the imperfections of our current world. It's built to resist things like rampant inflation, the creeping reach of authoritarianism, pervasive surveillance, censorship, and importantly, widespread financial exclusion. At its heart, it's about empowering individuals, giving them tools to sort of elude the expanding influence and the tightening grip of various institutions, both public and private.
That lineage is fascinating. Bitcoin didn't just appear in a vacuum, did it? It seems to have these deep roots and a very specific, almost rebellious, do-it-yourself kind of spirit. Can you tell us a bit about figures like St. Jude and the cypherpunks, the ones who really laid the groundwork for this?
Absolutely. St. Jude, a self-taught programmer, was an early, powerful advocate for women in computing and hacking. Famously declared, "Girls need modems," that kind of DIY spirit, a rejection of reliance on legacy institutions, that was central to the cypherpunks. They were a movement, really. Individuals who actively wrote code as a form of activism, fighting for privacy and civil liberties in the digital age. You might actually know some of their creations already. Things like Pretty Good Privacy or PGP, BitTorrent, the ideas behind WikiLeaks, even end-to-end encryption in apps like Signal and WhatsApp, and anonymous browsing with Tor. These all have roots in that movement. But the book makes a really compelling argument that Bitcoin is perhaps their most significant, their most impactful creation.
So, these cypherpunks, they were dreaming big, envisioning digital cash that could preserve privacy, preserve individual autonomy online. But they faced enormous technical hurdles, didn't they? What was the absolute biggest challenge, the mountain they had to climb to make this digital cash real?
Yeah, the big one. That's where the infamous double spending problem comes in.
Yeah.
Think about physical cash for a second. You can't easily make a perfect copy of a dollar bill, right?
Yeah.
And governments have systems to prevent counterfeiting. Digital money in banks works because there's a central authority, the bank itself, keeping a definitive record. They say who owns what. But with pure digital information, copying is trivial. Ctrl plus C, Ctrl plus V, easy. So how do you create digital cash that is both scarce, like gold, and unique, without a central authority validating every single transaction? It was this seemingly paradoxical set of demands. It needed to be universally available but provably scarce, unique and private, but also reliably traceable in a sense. Easy to send, but impossible to just copy.
And many brilliant minds tried for what, over 15 years? Systems like eGold, Liberty Dollar, Mondex, DigiCash, what ultimately proved to be their Achilles heel. Why did they fail where Bitcoin eventually succeeded?
The core recurring problem, almost every time, was centralization. Take eGold, for example. It relied on custodians. It had central offices, which made it inherently vulnerable to government intervention. And sure enough, the FBI and Secret Service eventually raided them, seized the gold, indicted the founders. Game over. The book calls this the pick your poison dilemma, which I think is a great way to put it. You either risk corruption and maybe uncontrolled supply without trusted parties managing things, or you face censorship and persecution with those trusted parties in place. Satoshi Nakamoto's stroke of genius, really, was creating digital money without needing those trusted parties at all. by inventing this decentralized publication system, this massively co-authored digital book, which is the Bitcoin ledger.
Right. So traditional money relies so heavily on these layers of trust in institutions. But if Bitcoin is designed to resist that, how does it actually manage to function without these trusted parties? The book breaks them down fascinatingly as managers, mediators, and makers. How does Bitcoin deal with them?
Yeah, and the profound insight here is that Bitcoin doesn't just manage these roles differently, it fundamentally eliminates the need for trust in them. Take traditional managers, like banks. We trust them with our savings, right? But they lend it out, which creates counterparty risk. Your money isn't actually just sitting there. Bitcoin sidesteps this. It empowers you to be your own bank. You secure your own private keys. You remove that central point of failure and trust.
Okay, so that's the manager aspect. What about mediators?
Right, mediators. Think about electronic payments today. They involve these complex webs of trusted parties. Visa, MasterCard, banks, payment processors. This leads to delays, like provisional versus final settlement, potential points of failure, and, critically, the collection of vast amounts of your personal data. They know what you buy, when, where. Bitcoin eliminates these intermediaries. You can send Bitcoin directly to anyone, anywhere in the world without needing credit checks or permission slips. Peer-to-peer.
And the third one, makers.
Makers.
Yeah.
Corporations issue stock, that's a form of making value. Central banks, like the U.S. Federal Reserve, sometimes called the monetary trinity, they issue currency by decree, fiat money. They manage and mediate its supply. We are forced to trust them to create money responsibly, to manage inflation.
So what does this all mean for us then? How does Bitcoin manage to sidestep what Nick Szabo called these security holes?
It's a radical re-engineering of money itself. That's the key takeaway. It removes the need for mandatory managers because you can custody your own Bitcoin. Secure your keys, be sovereign over your funds. It eliminates mediators because you send directly. Peer-to-peer, anywhere, no intermediaries, no credit checks, minimal delays compared to international wires, and crucially, it does away with central makers. The Fed, for example, frequently updates its policies. The rules change. The book cleverly calls these monetary groundhog days because the goalposts keep shifting. Bitcoin. No CEO, no central bank. Its monetary policy is non-discretionary, fixed forever, hard cap of 21 million coins, period. And it's exceedingly difficult, almost impossible practically, to change that fundamental rule. It's like a rule of law for money, not a rule of whoever's in charge this year.
You mentioned this digital book or ledger earlier. Can you explain a bit more about how this distributed ledger actually works? What makes it so different from, say, my bank's ledger?
Okay, so the Bitcoin ledger meticulously records every single movement of Bitcoin, right back to its Genesis block in 2009. But unlike bank ledgers, which merely represent external events like money moving between accounts in their system, the Bitcoin ledger determines who possesses Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't really exist outside of this ledger. The ledger is the reality of ownership. Now, the truly innovative part is there's no single central master copy, no single source of truth controlled by one entity. Instead, thousands of individuals all around the world run the Bitcoin software and maintain their own complete identical copies of the ledger. And these copies constantly converge towards a shared agreement, a consensus.
And that's where nodes and miners come in.
Exactly. Think of nodes as like independent digital librarians. Each one holds and rigorously validates a complete copy of the entire ledger, ensuring the rules are followed. Miners, on the other hand, are more like independent publishing houses. They compete fiercely, using significant computing power to bundle new transactions into blocks and add them as the next page to that digital book. They solve a complex computational puzzle that's the proof of work, and the winner gets to add the block and is rewarded with newly created Bitcoin and transaction fees. This constant competition, powered by energy expenditure, ensures that no single entity can dictate what gets written into the ledger. It provides this unalterable, truly decentralized record.
Okay, so Bitcoin is clearly different, fundamentally different from traditional currency. But how does the book position it against something like gold or even other digital currencies that have come along since?
It's definitely seen as a unique blend, almost a new monetary species. Like the dollar, Bitcoin has no inherent non-monetary use value. Its value is purely as money itself, what economists call monetary premium. You can't wear Bitcoin like jewelry or burn it for heat, but like gold, its production is costly, requiring that energy and computation we just discussed, and its supply is non-discretionary. It's entirely independent of human whims or political decisions. The book uses a great term for it, a synthetic commodity money. It acts like a scarce commodity, but it's digital.
It also uses a rather unexpected comparison, Bitcoin's network to Esperanto, the constructed language. That seems like a bit of a curveball.
It does, but it's actually a brilliant analogy when you unpack it. Esperanto, the language, is intrinsically well-crafted, meticulously designed, logical. But it ultimately failed to achieve widespread adoption. Why? It lacked a vibrant, active network of users. It didn't reach critical mass. Bitcoin, however, has exploded. It's rapidly gained tens of millions of users in less than 2 decades, following an adoption curve very similar to the internet itself. And crucially, it bootstrapped this network without insiders getting special treatment. There were no pre-mines, where the creators gave themselves a huge chunk of coins before anyone else could get involved, unlike many other cryptocurrencies.
Ah, so that fair launch matters.
It matters hugely for perceived neutrality and widespread distribution. This transparent, leaderless launch is a key reason why it's seen as different when you compare it to many other cryptocurrencies. Some have quite centralized makers or founders with significant control or less decentralized network structures. Think about Ethereum, for instance, where running a validating node can have high requirements, often leading to nodes being run on centralized cloud servers like AWS. Bitcoin's design, especially its launch, really shines as resistance money in that context.
All right, this brings us to a really interesting part of the book, this thought experiment involving the veil of ignorance. You're asked to decide. Would you prefer a world with Bitcoin or without it? But crucially, without knowing who you'd be in that world. What's the core point of setting it up like that?
It's a classic philosophical tool designed to force an unbiased evaluation. You have to consider how Bitcoin helps, or potentially harms, all 8 billion people on Earth, especially the most vulnerable, because you have an equal chance of being anyone in that hypothetical world. You could be rich, poor, powerful, oppressed. The exercise isn't about finding some perfect utopia. Bitcoin isn't that. It's about looking for marginal, yet potentially profound improvements to the status quo. It also directly challenges us to be aware of our own biases. Think about it. Those who might be inconvenienced by Bitcoin authoritarian leaders, central bankers, legacy financial institutions, they're naturally likely to react negatively, aren't they? Likewise, critics sometimes overlook their own opportunity costs of being wrong. Think of people who dismissed Bitcoin as a worthless fad when it was trading at, say, $100 or $1,000. Their bias perhaps blinded them.
The book talks about monetary luck, which sounds pretty significant. For someone listening, how does Bitcoin directly address the issues many people face with traditional monetary policy, its unpredictability, inflation?
Yeah, monetary luck is a powerful concept. Billions of people around the globe suffer under what the book calls bad monetary regimes. They experience things like double-digit inflation, sometimes hyperinflation, which acts like a hidden, covert tax. And this hidden tax disproportionately harms the less affluent. It just erodes their savings, their livelihoods. Now, central banks not only aim for price stability, that's their mandate often, but they frequently fall short for various political or economic reasons. Bitcoin offers a truly distinct alternative here. It's an opt-in money machine, where the rules are fixed and known in advance. Its absolutely fixed issuance schedule means there's no arbitrary money printing or destruction by a central authority. This fundamentally eliminates that maker risk. Now, does this come with price volatility in the short term? Yes, absolutely. That was a conscious trade-off Satoshi made to avoid needing trusted parties. But for many people, especially those living under unstable regimes, the freedom from centralized control and the long-term predictability of supply might well outweigh those short-term price swings.
Plus, its very existence subtly disciplines other central banks, doesn't it? It provides an alternative, an exit ramp, potentially encouraging more responsible behavior elsewhere.
Let's talk about privacy. Financial privacy is such a deeply personal and, frankly, increasingly hot topic. Why does it matter so much, especially now with digital tracking being so pervasive? And how can Bitcoin possibly provide it when its ledger is, well, public? Everyone can see the transactions, right?
Right, that seems like a paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But your financial transactions are incredibly revealing. They're a profound medium of revelation. They show your values, maybe your health status, your political leanings, your associations, your life, basically. And this data is under systematic threat. Corporations, governments, they're building massive digital dossiers on all of us. Traditional systems often force this uncomfortable dilemma. You choose the convenience of credit cards, sacrificing privacy, or you choose the privacy of physical cash, sacrificing convenience, especially online. Bitcoin offers a path toward truly decentralized digital cash that aims to combine the benefits of both.
Okay, but how? If the ledger is public.
It achieves privacy not through perfect anonymity, but through techniques that obscure the links. Sophisticated tools like CoinJoin are a key example.
CoinJoin basically blends transactions from multiple users together in a single, larger transaction. This breaks the clear, deterministic links between who sent what to whom. It creates a much larger anonymity set, making it probabilistic, not certain, who owns which specific piece of Bitcoin after the mix. And then there's the Lightning Network. This is a layer built on top of Bitcoin for faster, cheaper payments. It routes payments through multiple intermediate nodes, but crucially, those nodes don't know the ultimate source or the final destination of the payment. They only know the previous and next hop. This provides privacy through obscurity and shielding within the network structure. Look, no system is perfectly private, but Bitcoin offers robust tools that physical cash also shares in some ways, like pseudonymity. And the book argues the profound benefits of financial privacy are certainly worth the costs and complexities involved.
Financial censorship. That sounds terrifying, honestly, especially for people living under authoritarian regimes. Does the book give concrete, real-world examples of how this plays out and how Bitcoin actually helps in those situations?
Unfortunately, yes, there are far too many examples, and the book details some harrowing ones. Cases from Lebanon where banks froze withdrawals even for critical needs like cancer treatment. PayPal refusing service to Palestinians, Chinese banks denying service to ethnic Uyghurs, Russia freezing the bank accounts of opposition figures like Alexei Navalny. Even in the U.S., initiatives like Operation Choke Point effectively shut down legal, albeit controversial, businesses by pressuring banks. And we saw governments pressure financial institutions to blockade donations to WikiLeaks years ago.
So the ability to transact is a form of expression almost.
Exactly. The book makes that point strongly. Financial transactions are often expressions, supporting a cause, buying a book, subscribing to a newsletter that can be censored just like speech. Having access to uncensorable money, therefore, truly limits suffering and allows individuals and communities to flourish, to resist oppression. Now, is Bitcoin a silver bullet for, say, large-scale state-level sanctions evasion? Probably not. It's likely too volatile, too illiquid, and maybe too public on the base layer for billions in illicit flows. But it has repeatedly proven essential as a financial life raft in crises. During the Russia-Ukraine war, for instance, Ukraine received over $100 million in crypto donations early on. Their own deputy minister called it essential when the national banking system faltered under the invasion. And you have to compare this potential for misuse, which exists, with the vast documented sums laundered through traditional global banks by criminals, terrorists, and sanctioned entities every single year. The scale is orders of magnitude different.
So back to the veil of ignorance.
Right. Put yourself behind that veil again. Imagine living in one of the 54% of countries currently under an authoritarian regime. Would you prefer a world with uncensorable money as an option, even an imperfect one, or a world completely without it? The choice seems clearer from that perspective.
The statistics on unbanked and underbanked people globally are just staggering. You mentioned financial exclusion earlier. How does Bitcoin really serve as money for the margins, for those people who are often just completely overlooked by traditional finance?
It's a huge number, around 1.4 billion unbanked adults worldwide.
Yeah.
And disproportionately, these are women. They're often excluded for various reasons. Maybe physical distance from bank branches, high fees, lack of official documentation, or sometimes just a deep, understandable distrust in institutions after past failures or corruption. Bitcoin, because it's permissionless and internet native, simply doesn't discriminate based on these factors. It doesn't require government ID or a minimum balance. It doesn't charge exorbitant fees that would eat away at meager savings. It's accessible 365 days a year to literally anyone with an internet-connected device, even a basic smartphone, regardless of their background or location.
Are there specific stories the book highlights?
Yes, and they're incredibly powerful. There's the story of Roya Mahbub, an Afghan entrepreneur. She was able to pay women engineers working for her in Bitcoin, crucially, so their husbands or male relatives couldn't confiscate their wages, something that happened routinely with cash or bank transfers. There's an anonymized story of a woman escaping an abusive husband, able to secretly save small amounts of Bitcoin over time, giving her the means to eventually leave, something her abuser couldn't track or control. And the story of Alina, a Ukrainian refugee who managed to carry her family's entire life savings across the border, not as bulky cash, but cryptographically secured on a small piece of paper containing her private key phrase. For these individuals, you see, Bitcoin isn't just some abstract alternative investment. It's a profound tool for autonomy, for security, and in some of these cases, the book argues, it's akin to salvation.
Okay, let's tackle the big one. One of the most persistent criticisms leveled against Bitcoin is its energy consumption. Is it truly as wasteful as often portrayed, or is there a more nuanced perspective here presented in the book?
This is definitely a critical area, and the narrative around it often lacks, well, nuance. Bitcoin's security model, much like the physical security protecting the gold in Fort Knox, relies fundamentally on deterrence. Making attacks prohibitively expensive, it protects against counterfeiting, against creating Bitcoin out of thin air, and against that crucial double spending problem through strong cryptography and its mining process, the proof of work. Miners, collectively, act almost like a decentralized money manager for the entire network. They provide that crucial security against double spending by expending energy to solve those computational puzzles. Now, are Bitcoin's carbon emissions real? Yes, absolutely. The book acknowledges this. Estimates varies, but it might be around 0.13% of total global emissions. That's not insignificant. However, the criticism of waste often stems from a misunderstanding. People try to attribute energy use to individual transactions, but it isn't really how it works. The energy secures the entire network, the whole ledger, not just one payment. It's the cost of maintaining decentralized consensus without a central authority.
How does that cost compare to traditional systems?
That's a key point the book makes. Bitcoin's transparency in its security expenditure is actually remarkable. You can see exactly what miners earn in block rewards and fees. That's the security budget right there on the public ledger. Compare that to the security costs of the traditional financial system. The banks, the armored trucks, the militaries protecting trade routes, the entire infrastructure supporting the dollar system globally. Those costs are vast, but they're opaque and incredibly difficult to quantify. Furthermore, Bitcoin mining isn't just a pure cost. It can have surprising positive environmental externalities. Because miners are seeking the absolute cheapest energy sources, they are location agnostic. Mining hardware is portable and, crucially, it's interruptible. This allows it to monetize energy sources that would otherwise be wasted, like flared methane gas at oil wells. Burning that methane through generators for mining is far less harmful than releasing it directly. It can also utilize stranded renewable energy, like excess solar or hydropower in remote areas with no other way to sell that electricity. By providing a buyer of last resort, mining can actually incentivize more build-out of green energy infrastructure.
That nuance about incentivizing green energy is really interesting. But okay, even with those potential positives, 0.13% of global emissions is still tangible, as you said. Does the book address whether this environmental cost, even if manageable and maybe having some upsides, is philosophically justified for a system designed for resistance, especially given global climate challenges? And linked to that, why doesn't Bitcoin just switch to something like proof of stake, like some other cryptocurrencies have done, that uses way less energy, right?
Right. That's the fundamental trade-off, and the book tackles it head-on. It doesn't shy away from the energy question. While proof of stake, POS systems, certainly use significantly less energy, that's undeniable, they introduce different risks, particularly the risk of re-centralization over time. In POS, your influence over the network, your ability to validate transactions and earn rewards is generally proportional to the amount of stake you hold, how many coins you lock up. This can lead to rich-get-richer effects, where wealth concentration translates directly into control over the network's consensus mechanism. Over time, it could become dominated by a few large stakeholders.
Whereas proof of work is different.
It's exactly Bitcoin's proof-of-work (POW) mechanism, with its continuous requirement for external resources, specialized hardware, ASICs, and significant energy expenditure, fundamentally changes that power dynamic. Wealth alone doesn't grant you control. You constantly have to spend real-world resources, energy, to maintain influence. Hardware becomes obsolete, requiring continuous reinvestment. This constant churn makes it much harder for any single entity or small group to capture and maintain control over the network indefinitely. That continuous external resource expenditure is precisely what maintains robust decentralization and trust minimization in Bitcoin. So the design choice, while energy-intensive, powerfully reinforces Bitcoin's core commitment to being resistance money. It prioritizes censorship resistance and decentralization, secured by physics and thermodynamics, over optimizing for energy efficiency at the potential cost of reverting to trust-based or easily captured systems. It's a deliberate philosophical choice embedded in the protocol. And the book is pretty comprehensive, as I said. It anticipates and tries to address many of the common objections you hear beyond just energy use. For instance, that persistent Ponzi-like accusation.
Right.
Yeah, the idea that it's just the self-perpetuating game where early investors inevitably profit from later ones with no real underlying value or utility.
The book tackles this directly. It states very clearly that Bitcoin simply doesn't fit the legal or functional definition of a Ponzi or pyramid scheme. Key characteristics of those schemes are deception and opacity. Bitcoin's ledger, its rules, its code, they're all transparent, open source, publicly verifiable. There's no central operator promising guaranteed returns based on recruiting new entrants. Instead of dismissing it, the book highlights Bitcoin's demonstrated utility, its real-world use cases that we've touched on. As a refuge in currency crises, think of Cuba, Afghanistan, Venezuela. As a vital tool against authoritarianism, Nigeria, Belarus, Hong Kong, Ukraine. Sure, it might be a profit-seeking game for some participants, like any asset, but it demonstrably offers real, tangible benefits and utility beyond mere speculation for many others. Okay, but what about the very real threat of governments just trying to ban Bitcoin outright? That seems like a major risk. Or the concern that maybe its own developers, or perhaps the Lightning Network as it grows, could eventually become new forms of central authorities, compromising its whole resistance premise.
These are valid concerns to raise. Governments have tried to ban it, like China repeatedly cracking down on mining and trading. But Bitcoin has proven remarkably resilient. Why? Partly because it's globally distributed. Shutting it down everywhere simultaneously is practically impossible. And we've seen the opposite, too. Countries like El Salvador adopting it as legal tender. The core reason for this resilience, though, goes back to its design. It's open-source software. No single company, no CEO, no foundation controls Bitcoin. Developers contribute voluntarily from all over the world. And critically, users always retain the fundamental freedom to run the software they choose. If developers tried to push through a change that fundamentally centralized it or altered its core properties, users could simply refuse to upgrade or even fork the software to maintain the original rules.
And miners, couldn't they censor?
Miners are primarily incentivized by economics block rewards and transaction fees to include legitimate transactions in the blocks they produce. While theoretically possible, widespread censorship by miners is difficult to coordinate and potentially unprofitable if users start using alternative fee mechanisms or routing transactions differently. The distributed nature of mining provides significant resistance against capture. Even looking at the Lightning Network, while it currently has a somewhat hub-and-spoke structure, it doesn't negate Bitcoin's underlying resistance properties. Payments are routed cryptographically, and if one hub tries to censor, users can typically open channels with other hubs or route payments differently. It adds a layer, but doesn't fundamentally break the base layer's promise. And finally, it's interesting. While institutional blowups in the wider crypto world, like the collapse of FPX, certainly cause real harm to individual users caught up in them, they also, paradoxically perhaps, end up reinforcing the core value proposition of Bitcoin itself, self-custody. The devastating lesson learned by many is stark. Not your keys, not your coins.
It drives home the importance of holding your own Bitcoin, reinforcing the be your own bank principle. The message becomes undeniably clear: self-custody or else.
So let's bring it back to that veil of ignorance thought experiment one last time. After considering all these angles, the potential benefits, the risks, the criticisms, what's the ultimate takeaway the book wants us to grasp from this deep dive?
The conclusion the book reaches, arguing from that personally neutral, reasonably risk-averse perspective behind the veil, is pretty robust. You would fundamentally prefer a world with Bitcoin as an option, rather than one without it. Why? Because it provides unprecedented new ways for individuals to control their own personal financial information. It offers unparalleled financial inclusion for those marginalized by the traditional system. It provides robust resistance against censorship. And it minimizes that maker risk by removing discretionary human control over the monetary supply itself. Its emissions, while real and needing ongoing attention regarding energy sources, are argued to be manageable within the global context, potentially decreasing as the energy mix greens, and importantly, exhibit those potential positive externalities we discussed, like incentivizing green energy development, which absolutely need to be factored into the overall ethical equation.
Okay, so this isn't just about passively observing Bitcoin from the sidelines then. What actions, if any, might this deep dive, based on the book's philosophy, suggest for us, the listeners?
It's less about telling you to buy Bitcoin and more about understanding its potential role. The book encourages you, primarily, not to impede Bitcoin. Even if you personally perceive no need for it in your own life, living perhaps in a stable democracy with reliable banking, recognize that many others around the world do find immense value in it, and they arguably deserve the option of this powerful tool. More actively, it might suggest resisting draconian legislation that would seek to outright ban things like Bitcoin mining or the development and use of financial privacy tools. And perhaps more broadly, denouncing corporate and state overreach when it occurs within our existing legacy monetary networks. paying attention to how financial control is being used. Fundamentally, it's about being informed, thinking critically, and considering the broader long-term impact of different financial systems on human flourishing, freedom, and individual autonomy.
Wow. This deep dive into resistance money really does shift the perspective on Bitcoin quite dramatically, doesn't it? It moves so far beyond just the price charts and the speculative headlines. It reveals a potential tool with truly profound implications for individual freedom, for autonomy in what's becoming an increasingly digital and, frankly, surveilled world.
Indeed. And the story of Bitcoin is clearly far from over. No one knows for sure where it will ultimately lead, what its final form or role will be. But the groundbreaking discoveries Satoshi Nakamoto made solving the double spending problem trustlessly, creating digital scarcity those insights will endure. Even if, hypothetically, Bitcoin itself were to somehow fade away eventually, it would undoubtedly inspire powerful spiritual successors for years, maybe centuries to come. As long as people feel the need for a robust way to resist digital authoritarianism, to assert their financial sovereignty, the core ideas are out there now. It's really a testament to human ingenuity in the face of centralized control.
When you think about Roya in Afghanistan paying her female engineers, Alina, the refugee, carrying her savings on a piece of paper. For so many individuals on the margins, Bitcoin isn't just a currency, is it? It's a lifeline. And as the book beautifully concludes, the deeper truth, when you step behind that veil of ignorance, is that Bitcoin is for whomever you might turn out to be. Bitcoin truly is for anyone.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. In this increasingly digital world where central authorities, both state and corporate, seem to exert ever greater control over our lives, our data, our finances, what new forms of resistance money, perhaps building on Bitcoin's foundational principles of decentralization and censorship resistance, might humanity invent next to safeguard its freedoms? And how might that fundamentally impact the systems we currently take for granted?
Definitely a lot to think about there. And if you're looking to dive even deeper into these powerful concepts, explore the world of Bitcoin further, maybe understand the technicals or the history more, remember to visit bitcoinbytes.org. That's bitcoinbytes.org. We really hope this deep dive has provided you with some unexpected insights, maybe challenged some assumptions, and given you a fresh perspective on this fascinating technology.